The wheels of the supply wagon were still smoking when Elena Ward climbed down, the hem of her travel dress torn, one glove missing, and the last of her patience worn thin. She had been on the frontier for less than 2 hours, and already the Wild West had swallowed her whole. The horses had spooked at a rattler, the left wheel cracked against a hidden stone, and the wagon pitched so violently that she thought she'd be thrown into the canyon. Now the wagon sat tilted, injured like a wounded animal, and the small crowd of townsfolk from Red Butte stood around arguing about what to do with her. They weren't unkind, just startled, opinionated, and far too eager to send her someplace safer than their rough little town. "Best head back east," Miss Ward, an older man, insisted. "Frontier ain't for a lady schoolteacher, not alone." "She's headed to the mission school," a woman snapped. "We wrote for her, didn't we?" "We didn't know she'd be so fragile looking." Elena stiffened at that. She was many things, educated, determined, newly orphaned, but fragile was the last word she'd allow. She pressed her palms against her skirt, straightened her back, and prepared to defend herself. But before she spoke, a hush rippled through the group. Hoofbeats approached from the west. Slow, measured, unhurried, the kind of approach made by someone who feared nothing on this earth. Elena turned, and her breath caught. A tall Apache scout rode out of the red rock shadows, his horse moving as if it shared his pulse. The rider sat bareback, posture straight and effortless, dark hair tied with a strip of rawhide, broad shoulders draped in a simple leather vest. His gaze moved across the people, but stopped when it reached her. He didn't look away, not even when the townsfolk murmured his name. Dakota. A scout, a tracker, a man some feared, some respected, and none fully understood. Elena wasn't certain what she expected: hostility, coldness, some wild fire in his expression. But his gaze was steady, quiet, assessing, as if he were reading her in a language older than English itself. The older man cleared his throat nervously. "Dakota, trail's dangerous today. Rustlers spotted near the canyon." Dakota dismounted without a word. Even silent, he commanded the space around him. He looked at the broken wagon, then at Elena, and something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Not annoyance, not amusement. Something deeper, like recognition or warning. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. She hated that. No man had ever unsettled her with a look. "You're the new teacher," Dakota said finally. His voice was low, gravelly, shaped by a different cadence than the townsfolk. He didn't phrase it as a question. He already knew. "I am," she answered, forcing her chin to stay lifted. The older woman gestured nervously toward the hills. "Bandits attack anything that moves these days. Maybe she should ride with a group or head back to." "She will not ride alone," Dakota interrupted. Every head turned toward him. Even Elena's heart seemed to pause. Dakota stepped closer, boots crunching lightly on the red dirt. The heat of the sun reflected off his bronze skin, the muscles of his arms flexing with calm precision. He stopped just a few paces from her, close enough that she felt his presence like a shift in the wind. "I ride to the trading post," he said. "I will take her safely." The older man sputtered. "Are you sure?" "The trail's risky." Dakota's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Not for me." It wasn't arrogance. It was truth. Elena swallowed, torn between gratitude and uncertainty. She didn't know this man. He was a stranger, a warrior, a guardian of a world she didn't yet understand. Yet in the tension of that moment, surrounded by fearful townsfolk, his quiet certainty felt like the safest thing she'd been offered all day. Her voice came out softer than intended. "Thank you." Dakota didn't nod, didn't smile. He simply held her gaze for a heartbeat longer, a heartbeat that felt strangely significant before turning to adjust the reins of his horse, and just like that, her journey on the frontier began not with confidence, but with the unsettling awareness that she had caught the attention of a man who missed nothing and revealed even less, a man who would soon pull her into a world wilder, deeper, and more dangerous than she ever imagined. Elena had barely swung her travel bag over one shoulder before Dakota extended a hand, not to help her mount, but to steady the horse she was about to climb. He did it without a word, fingers wrapped around the reins, his other hand resting lightly on the stallion's neck as if calming a restless spirit. The townsfolk watched from a distance, whispering behind palms. Some were worried. Some were curious. A few looked downright scandalized at the thought of the new schoolteacher riding off alone with an Apache scout who spoke more through silence than speech. Dakota ignored them, helped Elena secure her seat with the same quiet efficiency he did everything else. It wasn't until he placed her travel bag behind the saddle that she noticed his movements were careful, precise, almost gentle. He was not a man accustomed to clumsiness. "You ride well?" he asked, glancing up at her. "Moderately," she admitted. "Enough not to fall off unless something frightening happens." "Frightening things happen often here," he said simply, swinging up onto his own horse with fluid strength. "Stay close." She swallowed hard. "I will." They set off down the narrow trail that wound between red rock cliffs. The air smelled of dust and sagebrush, the wind warm and dry against Elena's cheek. Her nerves steadied as the rhythm of hoofbeats became familiar. Still, she felt Dakota's presence beside her as a kind of gravity, quiet, powerful, inescapable. For the first mile, he spoke little. Elena tried to tell herself she preferred it that way. Conversation had never been her weakness, but something about him made words difficult. Not out of fear. Out of awareness. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Do you travel this route often?" "A few times each moon." "Is it always this quiet?" "No." His jaw tightened. "Today is too quiet." Elena's fingers tightened on her reins. "Is that bad?" "Silence can mean danger. Or peace. We will see which one finds us." Comforting, she thought sarcastically, but she kept it to herself. They rode another stretch in silence. Dakota's gaze scanned the cliffs, the ground, the horizon, everywhere. Elena realized with a small jolt that while she was trying not to get lost, he was preparing for whatever might try to find them. After an hour, the land softened into rolling plains. A creek glittered in the sun, and cottonwoods swayed in the breeze. The beauty of the frontier washed over her, easing the tension in her shoulders. "It's breathtaking out here," she said. Dakota shot her a quick sidelong glance. "You have not seen the best parts yet." "What are the best parts?" He didn't smile, but there was the faintest warmth in his eyes. "The parts you have to earn." Before she could ask what that meant, her horse stumbled on a loose stone. Elena gasped, leaning forward instinctively. The horse recovered, but her heart did not. Dakota was beside her in an instant. His hand was on her shoulder, steadying her before she even knew she was slipping. The touch startled her, not rough, not demanding. Just firm enough that she felt the strength beneath it. "You are safe," he said quietly. She heard more in those words than he probably intended. "Thank you," she whispered. He withdrew his hand slowly, as though making sure she was fully balanced before releasing her. The trail narrowed again, forcing them to ride close, knees brushing occasionally. Each accidental touch sent small shocks through her. Though she tried desperately to ignore them, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the plains. "How far to the trading post?" she asked. "Before night," he answered. "Unless we are slowed." "Slowed by what?" He didn't reply. Instead, he lifted his chin slightly, signaling her to listen. She heard nothing at first, just the wind. Then she caught a faint sound in the distance. A coyote? No. Something heavier. HOOFBEATS. She looked at him sharply. Is it the rustlers? Maybe, he murmured. Maybe not. There are many kinds of riders on these lands. Her pulse quickened. Dakota nudged his horse closer to hers, voice low, controlled. If they come toward us, you ride behind me. Do not argue. I never argue, she whispered back. This time, one corner of his mouth actually lifted. You argue often. Before she could defend herself, the hoofbeats faded, moving away instead of toward them. Dakota relaxed slightly, though his vigilance never vanished. The rest of the ride stretched long and quiet. Elena found herself studying him not openly, but in careful glances. The strength of his hands, the way his posture absorbed every movement of the horse, the ease with which he belonged to this land. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, and for reasons she couldn't yet explain. Being near him felt less like danger, and more like destiny. The sky darkened like spilled ink as Elena and Dakota rode, the last of the sun disappearing behind the jagged cliffs. Shadows stretched across the trail, and the wind carried a chill she hadn't expected. Her hands, once steady on the reins, now trembled, not entirely from the cold. Dakota slowed his horse, scanning the horizon with a practiced eye. Elena followed his gaze, noticing the rocky overhang up ahead, just wide enough to shelter two riders and their mounts. This will do, he said, his voice low, measured. We stop here tonight. She dismounted, shivering despite the layers she wore. The damp from the creek earlier had soaked her boots and dress, and the wind seemed determined to cut through whatever protection she had. Dakota's horse nuzzled her shoulder briefly before he tied it to a nearby rock, then returned to stand beside her. Elena swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the closeness. He was imposing, broad-shouldered, steady, alive with quiet energy. She wanted to give the impression of confidence, but her teeth were chattering, and she could not hide it. You're cold, he stated plainly. No accusation, no question, just fact. I can manage, she murmured, trying to sound braver than she felt. Dakota shook his head and knelt briefly to gather firewood. Within minutes, he had a small blaze crackling between them, smoke curling into the night. Elena huddled near it, hands extended toward the warmth. But even as the flames licked the air, she realized she had not fully felt safe until Dakota moved closer. Closer, he said softly. She flinched. He cut her off with emotion, gentle but firm. His eyes locked on hers with a look she couldn't read entirely. Then, without hesitation, he removed his shirt, exposing the dark bronze of his chest. Elena blinked, stunned. He was imposing. Yes, but it wasn't just his size or muscle that caught her attention. It was the steady warmth of him, the quiet authority in his movements, the way he made space for her without imposing. Take it, he said. Indicating she stepped nearer. Confused, she obeyed, almost against her will. She pressed herself against him, not roughly, not violently, but with careful attention to the space between them. His chest was warm, solid, and alive. You're trembling, he murmured, his voice low, almost intimate. I'm cold, she admitted. Dakota's large hands rested lightly on her back. She expected pressure, but it was only warmth, guidance, safety. The shock of how natural it felt against her nerves made her heart skip a beat. You are safe, he said again. Though this time, it sounded almost like a promise rather than a statement of fact. She allowed herself to lean closer. The firelight played over his features, the strong jaw, the high cheekbones, the intensity of his dark eyes. For a moment, she felt suspended in time, the sound of the wind and the fire fading to a distant hum. Feel this, he whispered, tilting his head slightly so she could place her hand against the center of his chest. Elena obeyed, pressing her palm lightly. Her heart began to race. Beneath her fingers, she could feel it, steady, strong, unwavering, and yet quickening with some unspoken emotion. Your heart? It's different, she whispered. It only beats this fast when danger comes, he murmured, voice low, intimate. Or when you are near. Elena's breath caught. The words, simple as they were, carried weight. Here, under the shadow of the cliffs and the open sky, she understood something she had not before. He was not just a protector in the physical sense. He was guarding something deeper, something that could not be measured in gestures alone. The fire crackled between them, sending sparks upward like tiny stars. She could hear his breathing, his heartbeat, feel the heat radiating from him. And for the first time since arriving in Red Butte, Elena felt entirely safe, though not from danger, but from herself. From the part of her that feared being seen, being vulnerable, being alive to the rawness of this frontier. Dakota's gaze never left hers, and she realized she did not want it to. In that silent understanding, amidst the cold, the shadows, and the firelight, something had shifted. Trust was forming, not blind, not naive, but absolute in that moment. She had no words. She only pressed closer, leaning against him, feeling the rhythm of his heart, and allowing herself to understand what she had never expected, that a warrior's protection could also be tenderness, and that perhaps she had found a strength in him she did not yet have in herself. And in the quiet of the night, with the fire casting gold and shadow across their faces, she began to wonder if this journey into the wild was not only about survival, but about discovering a heart that could beat for her as fiercely as her own. The fire had burned low, leaving a gentle glow that danced across the overhang walls. Outside, the wind sighed through the cliffs, carrying whispers of the night, an owl's distant cry, the rustle of unseen creatures. But inside, Elena felt a stillness that was almost sacred. She remained pressed against Dakota, her hand tentatively resting on his chest, feeling the slow, deliberate thrum beneath her palm. Each beat seemed to echo through her, steady and insistent, a rhythm both foreign and strangely familiar. Dakota's head tilted slightly, the intensity of his gaze softening as he noticed her hesitation. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice low, almost a murmur that blended with the crackle of the fire. "Feel? What?" Elena's voice trembled, unsure whether she was speaking of the warmth of his chest or the rapid tightening of her own heart. "Mine," he replied simply. He shifted so she could rest her hand more fully, letting her feel the steady power beneath his ribs. "Feel that." She did. The heartbeat was strong, a drum of life that seemed to demand attention. She could feel the rise and fall of his chest, the raw, human energy that spoke of endurance, discipline, and something personal he didn't readily give to the world. "Why? Why does it feel so different?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Because," he said, the words stretching with significance, "my heart only beats this way near you." The words struck her like a sudden gust of wind, cold and shocking, yet thrilling. Her palm pressed closer, and she realized she had not only been feeling his heartbeat, she had been listening for it, drawn into its rhythm as though it could tell her a story she could not yet understand in words. "My heart?" she repeated, incredulous, almost afraid to voice the thought. She looked up at him, searching for jest or deceit, but his eyes were steady, unwavering, dark pools of sincerity. "Yes," Dakota murmured. "I have fought many battles, faced many dangers, yet none have made it beat like this." He paused, voice dipping lower, almost reverent. "Not until you." Elena felt a flutter in her own chest, a mirroring pulse that she had not expected. Her fingers, still lightly pressing against him, grew tentative, almost reverent. She was aware, suddenly, of the weight of the moment. of the enormity of a man so strong, so fearless, allowing her inside physically, yes, but also emotionally. In the subtle honesty of his confession, for the first time, she realized that the frontier was not just land and danger, it was also intimacy, raw and unfiltered, waiting to be discovered in moments like this. The firelight flickered across Dakota's face, revealing the lines of thought etched into his brow, the intensity of his gaze softened by trust and an unspoken vulnerability. She could see, even in the dim glow, that this man had chosen her not out of necessity or obligation, but because she had awakened something in him that the wilderness itself could not. Her own breath caught. She had spent her life protecting herself, holding back from strangers, from men, from any connection that could be dangerous or inconvenient. And yet here, pressed against him, listening to the deliberate cadence of his heartbeat, she understood that to survive this world, this life, sometimes one had to surrender, just a little, to trust. "Dakota?" she whispered, barely daring to speak. He said softly, resting his forehead lightly against hers. "You are safe, here, now. Only this moment matters." She closed her eyes and allowed herself to breathe him in the warmth, the steady rhythm of his chest, the quiet honesty in his presence. And with each beat, each whisper, each subtle movement, she felt herself surrender not in fear, but in recognition. She was exactly where she needed to be, in a heart she could trust, in a world that was raw, dangerous, and alive. The night stretched around them, the fire low but unwavering. And for the first time since stepping into Red Butte, Elena felt entirely unafraid. She felt connection. She felt life. And she felt the impossible stirrings of something neither of them could yet name, but that would, in time, define the frontier not just as land to be survived, but as a place where hearts could find each other against all odds. Dakota's chest rose and fell against her hand, steady, alive, insistent, and she understood in that quiet, suspended moment that the Wild West was not just a place of survival, it was also a place where two hearts could beat in resonance, even amid danger, even amid silence. The night air was thick with tension as Elena and Dakota settled near the small fire. She had begun to relax in the warmth of his presence, letting herself feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat under her palm. But the frontier had a way of reminding even the bravest souls that safety was fleeting. Before dawn, the faint sound of hooves echoed from the canyon entrance, carried on the cool morning breeze. Elena's eyes snapped open. Something was coming, and it was moving fast. Dakota's head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring as he assessed the approach. His body stiffened, every muscle coiled like a spring. The calm that had enveloped her all night disappeared in an instant. "Elena," he said softly, almost too quietly for her to hear, "behind me, now." She obeyed without question, sliding to the ground and ducking close against the rocks as Dakota stepped in front of her. His hands were already on his weapons, bow and knife, leather straps taut, eyes scanning the shadows. He didn't glance at her again, but she could feel the protective heat radiating from him. Like a shield she could not see but could rely on. The rustlers burst into view, 5 men on horses, faces masked, eyes hard, hands greedy. Their horses whinnied and stamped, hooves pounding against the rocky floor of the canyon. Elena's heart raced, but she remembered Dakota's steady presence. She took a deep breath, trying to ground herself, and realized she wasn't alone. Not for the first time in her life, she could rely completely on someone else. Dakota moved like a shadow, fast and precise. His knife flashed under the dim light as he disarmed the first man who lunged at him. His bow followed next, the arrow striking true. And then the rustlers scattered, surprised at the skill and speed of the lone Apache. Elena watched, frozen and awed as Dakota's movements became a blur strong arms. Quick reflexes, calm mind. He did not strike unnecessarily, but each action carried authority, decisiveness, and unyielding control. Even in danger, he remained a master of himself. One rustler, more desperate than the others, swung a heavy club toward Elena. She froze, too startled to move. Dakota reacted instantly, leaping between them. The club struck his shoulder with a heavy thud, pain flashing in his dark eyes, but he did not falter. He pushed Elena back behind the cover of the fire's glow, then retaliated with a skillful strike that sent the man sprawling. "Are you hurt?" Elena cried, moving closer despite his silent protest. "Minor," he muttered, though she could see blood beginning to stain the leather of his shirt. "Stay close. Do not move." Her fingers trembled as she tore the corner of her skirt to bandage his shoulder. His eyes, dark and intense, followed her every move not with irritation, but with trust. He allowed her to help him, to be near, even in the middle of danger. It was a trust she didn't take lightly. The remaining rustlers, now wary of the lone Apache's skill, fled into the canyon's shadows, their hooves fading into the distance. The quiet returned, heavier now, carrying the smell of sweat, dust, and blood. Dakota lowered his knife and let out a slow breath. He glanced at Elena, chest heaving slightly from exertion, shoulder pressed where she had bandaged him. For a brief moment, he looked human, vulnerable, yet still strong, still commanding. "You should not have come so close," he said softly, almost a whisper. "I couldn't leave you," she replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. He studied her, the firelight flickering across his features. Elena realized in that quiet, charged silence that the line between protector and companion was blurring. She had witnessed his strength, his precision, and his courage, and now she was part of it, part of his world even as he remained fiercely protective. He exhaled slowly, shifting so that his body shielded her once more, even though the immediate threat had vanished. The canyon felt endless, the danger momentarily past. Yet Elena sensed that nothing, no rustler, no storm, no challenge could break the bond that had begun to form between them in the shadow of that fire. She pressed her hand lightly to his chest, feeling the thrum of life beneath the fabric. His heartbeat was steady again, though faster than before, and she knew it had not been fear alone that had made it quicken. It had been her. And in that silent canyon, Elena realized something powerful. The frontier was not just a place of danger, it was a place where courage, trust, and hearts could collide, and she had already begun to find a home in both. The canyon slowly brightened with the pale light of dawn, casting long shadows across the rocks and the dust-streaked trail. Elena followed Dakota as he led the way, his movements cautious but steady, each step measured as though the land itself had taught him respect for its dangers. His shoulder still bore the faint stain of blood from the night's encounter, and she kept her hand near him instinctively, ready to aid him again if needed. After several miles, they arrived at a hidden clearing, shielded from view by a natural arch of red rock. Dakota dismounted and approached a cluster of bushes, moving aside a camouflaged entrance to reveal a small, weathered cabin nestled against the cliffside. The wood was aged, but the structure was solid. Smoke curled from the chimney, though no one appeared to be home. "This was my family's hunting cabin," Dakota said quietly, his voice softer than it had been since she first met him. "I come here when I need to remember who I am, or who I once was." Elena stepped inside, glancing around. The cabin was sparse but functional. A small hearth dominated one wall, and a simple cot rested in the corner. A few personal items, hunting tools, a worn blanket, and a carved wooden figurine hinted at the life Dakota had once known. She realized then that this place was more than a refuge from the wilderness. It was a sanctuary of memory, a place where the warrior who had protected her so fiercely could shed his armor, even just slightly, and reveal the man beneath. Dakota set his pack down and gestured for her to sit on a small stool near the fire. He unrolled a blanket and began tending to his minor wound, the knife and cloth moving with precision and care. Elena watched silently, noticing how every motion carried the weight of experience, years of surviving in the wild. Of hunting, of fighting, but also of protecting. Of being responsible for those who could not protect themselves. "Why do you live so alone?" she asked, curiosity breaking the silence. He paused, looking toward the cabin walls as if they held the answer. "I have learned that solitude teaches a man many things. Discipline, awareness, strength, and sometimes it teaches the price of loss." Elena tilted her head. "Loss?" Dakota's eyes darkened slightly, memories flickering behind them like shadows on the rock walls. "My family. They were taken from me. A raid many years ago. I swore then that no one innocent would suffer while I could stop it. That is why I move the way I do. Why I trust so few." She reached out instinctively, placing a hand on his forearm. He flinched slightly at first, the reflex of a lifetime of caution, but then allowed the contact. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I can't imagine." He shook his head slowly. "It is not a story I dwell on. Only lessons remain. Strength, caution, loyalty. And now," he added quietly, meeting her gaze, "you remind me that life is not only survival. Sometimes it is connection." Elena's heart thudded in response, not entirely from fear. She understood now why he had been so intense, so silent, so protective. He had built walls around himself not from cruelty, but from necessity. And yet, in her presence, those walls were subtly shifting. "You." She began, then faltered. How could she explain the mixture of awe, fear, and longing she felt for a man she barely knew but somehow trusted completely? "You are remarkable." He allowed himself the faintest smile, a shadow of warmth breaking through the stoic mask. "Remarkable is a dangerous word," he said softly, "but I will accept it. This once." Silence fell over them again, but it was different now. The quiet was no longer tense or uncertain. It carried understanding, a shared knowledge that both had come a long way to arrive at this moment. The wild canyon, the hidden cabin, the remnants of a warrior's past, they were all part of the same story. Elena realized that this secluded cabin, this intimate space away from the eyes of the world, was where she could finally see Dakota as more than a protector, more than a warrior. He was a man shaped by pain, by discipline, by the land itself, and yet capable of tenderness, trust, and even affection. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light through the cabin's single window, Elena felt a shift within herself. She was no longer merely a visitor in the wilderness, nor just a witness to Dakota's life. She was part of it now, woven into the fabric of his carefully guarded world. And in that realization, both fear and hesitation melted away, replaced by something entirely new, a quiet certainty that whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them together. The sun had risen fully over the canyon, painting the cliffs in brilliant golds and reds. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Elena and Dakota packed their minimal belongings, ready to continue their journey toward the trading post. Yet, as they mounted their horses, an unspoken tension lingered between them, heavier than the weight of their saddlebags. Elena's mind swirled with conflicting thoughts. Red Butte awaited her, a small town, orderly, predictable. A place where she could teach, live, and perhaps carve a future safe from the dangers she had already faced. Yet beside her sat Dakota, whose presence had become a constant she hadn't realized she craved. His hand brushed the reins against hers, and her pulse quickened. She couldn't ignore it. The first mile passed in silence, the kind of quiet that was both comforting and tense. Elena dared a glance at him. Dakota's eyes were fixed on the trail ahead, but the faintest crease in his brow betrayed his thoughts. She wondered if he was pondering the same choice she was avoiding, a life tethered to the town, or one bound to the wild and to him. "Dakota," she began tentatively, voice low, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile equilibrium. "What? What will happen when we reach the trading post?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and unwavering. "We reach it," he said finally, "and you must choose. There is safety there, and there is life here. I cannot decide for you." Her chest tightened. She had suspected as much, yet hearing it confirmed made the decision feel real, imminent. Elena realized that this choice was about more than geography. It was about trust, about surrender, about allowing herself to step fully into a life she had never imagined. She faltered, searching for words. "I don't know if I can go back, not after everything I've seen, not after you've shown me the world this way." Dakota turned his horse slightly, just enough that their eyes met. "The town will judge you," he said. "They do not understand this land, its dangers, its truths. And yet, they offer security. You may have to choose between safety and what your heart tells you." Her gaze dropped to his chest, remembering the steady beat she had pressed her hand against, strong, unwavering, alive. That heartbeat had become a rhythm she could follow, a measure of life she had not known she was missing. In it, she found courage, warmth, and a sense of belonging she had never felt in town or city. Her voice trembled, but she found strength in the trembling. "I can't imagine leaving this." A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corners of Dakota's mouth. "Then you have made your choice," he said softly. "But you must say it aloud." Elena drew a deep breath, feeling the sun on her face and the solid reassurance of his presence beside her. "I will stay with you in this land, in this life, wherever you are." Dakota's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through his normally stoic demeanor. He nodded once, decisively, then reached out, letting her hand find his. Their fingers intertwined over the reins, a silent acknowledgement that their bond was no longer just circumstance, it was chosen, mutual and undeniable. For a moment, the canyon seemed to hold its breath. The wind softened, the distant calls of birds filled the air, and even the sun seemed to linger on the horizon as though blessing the decision that had been made. Elena felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of peace. She was not just surviving the frontier anymore. She was living it fully with someone who had become more than a protector, someone who had become a part of her heart. Dakota guided his horse along the trail with a steadiness that mirrored the reassurance he now offered her. "Life will be difficult," he said, voice low but firm. "The land does not forgive weakness, and the world beyond it may not understand our choices. But here, with each other, we will endure." Elena nodded, her hand still clasped around his. She realized that the frontier had taught her more than she could have imagined. Bravery was not just about facing dangers, but about trusting, choosing, and loving without reservation. And in this moment, beside the man who had shown her the truth of both strength and tenderness, she felt ready to face whatever the Wild West had left to throw at them. Together, they rode toward the next chapter, not toward town, not toward safety, but toward a life they would carve themselves, hand in hand, heart to heart. The sun crested the horizon, spilling gold and amber across the canyon walls. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of sagebrush and the soft warmth of a new day. Elena and Dakota had ridden in silence for some time, each lost in thought, the quiet only broken by the occasional stamp of a horse's hooves on the rocky trail. Elena's heart still raced, not from danger, but from the choice she had made. She had chosen this life, the rugged, unpredictable frontier over the safety of the town. She had chosen him. Choosing Dakota, a man whose past was steeped in loss, whose world was wild and unyielding, had felt terrifying yet exhilarating. Dakota guided his horse to a small clearing, a place where the cliffs opened up to the morning light. He dismounted and extended a hand to Elena. She slid from her saddle, her legs trembling slightly, not from exhaustion, but from the intensity of the moment. He turned to her fully, his dark eyes catching the first rays of the sun. Elena could see the strength in him, the power and precision of the warrior, but now it was tempered by something far deeper, vulnerability. A rare, human softness that he reserved only for her. He stepped closer, his bare chest catching the light, the rhythm of his heartbeat steady beneath her gaze. "Feel that," he whispered, tilting his head slightly so she could place her hand against him. Elena obeyed, her fingers pressing lightly, almost reverently. The steady beat of his heart resonated with her own, each pulse a silent promise, a testament to the connection they had forged over nights of danger, days of travel, and countless moments of quiet understanding. "My heart will never fear again," Dakota murmured, voice low, filled with a conviction that made her chest ache. "Not as long as you are with me. Not as long as I can keep you safe, and not as long as you let me in." Elena's eyes brimmed with tears she didn't try to hide. She had feared the frontier, feared its dangers, and even feared her own feelings. But in that instant, pressed close to him, she realized fear no longer had dominion over her. Not with him. "Stay," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "I stay with you. In this life, this land, wherever you are." Dakota's lips curved into a faint but genuine smile, the first she had seen unguarded and unrestrained. He reached for her, hands warm and steady, lifting her slightly as if she weighed nothing at all. Their foreheads touched, and the world around them, the canyon, the horses, the rising sun faded to insignificance. "You understand," he murmured, "that this life will be hard, that it will demand everything of us." "I do," Elena said, closing her eyes, letting the truth of her choice settle in her bones. "But I also understand that it will be worth it, because we face it together." Dakota's hand came to rest at the small of her back, holding her close, grounding her. She felt the power in him, not just the physical strength of the warrior, but the unwavering certainty of a man who had chosen to protect, to trust, and now to love. For a long moment, they simply stood there, connected in silence, feeling the sun warm their backs and the earth beneath their boots. Elena realized that this was what the frontier had truly offered her, not just survival, not just adventure, but a love that demanded courage, patience, and trust. A love that was raw, unpolished, and entirely theirs. Dakota tilted his head, brushing his lips lightly against hers, a touch soft, deliberate, a promise rather than a question. Elena responded, her arms rising to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her hands. The rhythm was steady, insistent, alive. It had carried them through danger, through fear, and now into something far greater, a shared future. Pulling back just slightly, he whispered once more, "Stay, and my heart will never fear again." Elena smiled through the tears that had escaped. "Then I am staying," she whispered, "forever." The wind carried the words across the canyon, sweeping over the cliffs and through the plains beyond. The world felt expansive, wild, and limitless, yet anchored in this single, unbreakable truth. Two hearts intertwined, brave enough to face the unknown together. They mounted their horses once more. But this time, it was not fear that drove them, it was purpose. Together, they rode into the rising sun, toward a life forged by courage, trust, and love. The Wild West stretched out before them, vast and untamed. But now it was no longer just a place of danger, it was home. And with each beat of Dakota's heart beneath her hand, Elena knew, without doubt, that they had found something far stronger than survival. They had found each other,